Yeah.
I'm John Phillips. I'm a professor in the Department of Biological Sciences at Virginia Tech. I was here at Cornell for a long time. I was a graduate student from probably 77 to 84, but I worked as an undergraduate 4 summers before that when I was at Swarthmore College. I worked with Craig, and so I was on his summer crew of undergraduates, and then spent a year in Germany and came back to graduate school here. NBMD was, it was the only environment I knew because I had worked as an undergraduate here. My interests spanned the behavior and neuroscience end of things, and so it was a perfect match. I would support the idea that the interactions with fellow students were just a critical part of my education and my development, and I was lucky to come in with a large cohort of, I think we had 12 students in the graduate class that I was in. The informal meetings and the lunch groups and the so forth both were contributed enormously to my my development scientifically, and I also dabbled in social systems and evolution of mating systems and so forth with a paper or two, in part because of my interactions with my colleagues, which wasn't my primary area of research. So it was really an immersion in this integrative interface between behavior and evolution on the one hand and mechanism and neuroscience on the other. Yeah, I had neuroethologists. Jeff Kamhai was on my committee. Steve Emelin was on my committee. So I was getting input from the full range of perspectives, or most of it that was here in the department. I had been here as an undergraduate when sociobiology came out, and some of the new excitement about social organization and behavioral ecology. But I also really find it necessary when thinking about adaptive function and fitness to think about mechanism, and not just as a explanation of what you've observed, but actually to generate alternative hypotheses. And so have looked for mechanistic explanations for parental care in songbirds, and for the adaptive function of mating systems and so forth, where the mechanism matters, where it's not at all clear that you're considering all the possible alternative hypotheses unless you look at different levels of organization and different perspectives, I guess. Well, I'm interested in sensory function, and not just as a mechanistic explanation of the response to certain kinds of stimuli, but also how the evolution, how the functioning of sensory systems constrain the information that an animal can obtain from the environment, and constrain its ability to behave adaptively. So I, for example, have done much of my work looking at spatial orientation, and in particular the magnetic sense of both vertebrates and invertebrates. And this is, sort of or for my money, is probably the last major sensory system that was there to really learn truly fundamental new things about. And part of what has driven our research in recent years is this perspective that mechanistically people have found two different types of magnetic receptors that are present in the same animal. And the information that they provide the animal is non-intuitive, in the sense that the most straightforward mechanism is a mechanism involving particles of magnetite, and they act like little compass needles. And yet they're not used as a compass. So at least in amphibian and birds, they have both mechanisms. And in terms of an optimal engineering design, magnetite would make the most sense as a compass. And yet all of these animals, as far as we can tell, that live in above ground and have a normal light regime, use a light-dependent magnetic compass that involves a photoreceptor and a quantum process that is really new to biology. And what the sort of background from NB&B suggested is that you couldn't have this light-dependent photoreceptor-based mechanism wouldn't be there if it was simply to provide compass information, because magnetite does that very well. Natural selection is unlikely to produce something that is totally redundant, and therefore we had to look for new functionality in the light-dependent system. And because of the biophysics of how it operates, it is qualitatively a different type of mechanism, something that might function more like a spherical coordinate system of some kind, or a complex pattern surrounding the animal. And at this point, we've found now that probably all animals, virtually all animals, have a very well-developed magnetic sense, and that includes mice and rodents that have been studied for decades, and yet nobody has discovered this. And it has caused us to think that the magnetic sense is not an exotic sensory system used exclusively for long-distance orientation. And in fact, its primary function may be in organizing spatial perception at a local level and helping to structure and encode spatial information in novel environments, and to put different local maps into register to produce a global map of familiar space. And so the argument is that underlying all the very well-studied types of spatial neurons in the brain of rodents and other vertebrates, place cells and grid cells and head direction cells and so forth, is this underlying structure, and that this is a fundamental part of how animals organize the spatial world that has simply not been appreciated, and time will tell. But our best guess at this point is that there's just a major missing piece of our understanding of spatial cognition, and that this sensory system, this very, very unusual sensory system, turns out to be that underlying foundation or structure. Well, I think the question of whether humans have a magnetic sense is one that is I sort of anticipate leaving for my retirement years, for obvious reasons. It would be surprising, given what we think now about mammals, that humans would not have some kind of magnetic sense. But there absolutely is no good evidence at this point that that is true. What is true, I think, and from my own experience, is that there is such a thing as a spatial sense or a directional sense that some people claim to have and other people claim not to have. And I personally have experienced. So I've had a very good directional sense, the best I've ever encountered up through my graduate years, and then lost it. And I now can't find my way out of a wet paper bag. So I think there's something there. And if it's a magnetic sense, it's something like our vestibular sense that may help us as a reference when we're computing turn angles and path directions and distances and so forth. And there's obviously nothing that we consciously perceive, but we understand enough about how animals sense a magnetic field, particularly with this light-dependent or photoreceptor-based system, that I think the time is close when we'll know how to ask the question correctly with humans.